Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. We learned today Leilu Nishmat Avidir Chayavram and Rachaleh the Merzvi. Sorry about that, Martin. I think I've said it hundreds of times. Stick in my head. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish off the last paragraph of chapter 15, Tetvav. We left off, we didn't do it. I originally was planning on doing a shiur special today on Lo Tachmod. However, my entire staff seems to have lost my shiur somewhere. The source sheets, the actual shiur. So once I hire a new staff, they can all fan out around all the recesses of this house and locate said shiur. Then I'll give the shiur. There's another shiur I want to give. They're going to be completely standalone, having absolutely nothing to do with this class particularly. Two I want to do. One is the transmission of Torah, how it got from Har Sinai to modern times, to today. Different between the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam and Arachai, the Torah and the Gaonim. It's for most people, it's a big mishmash. That's one. And the other one, I don't remember if I did in this class or not, it has to do with Zmanim. I don't remember if I did that one yet or not, but basically all the different signposts of the day, Alot HaShachar, Mishi Akir, Plag HaMincha, all that, to know what they are and to understand the halakhic ramifications. But that will be at some other point. I'm just saying it so that I don't forget. Okay, so we're going to do just the very last paragraph first in the end of chapter 15, Tetvav. It starts with the words, Umimash tzarich lizaher. Now, this chapter that we're finishing off, we're talking again, remember, about prishut. We're talking about abstinence. And he gave us some ideas of how to acquire such a midah, but he gives us a very strong warning. And the truth is, this warning applies pretty much across the board to all these things he's trying to teach us. But it's important at this point to mention it. Now, I'll explain why he's giving us this heads up. If you remember, I told you that when we finished up to Parak Yud Aleph, Nikiyut, that would be the easy part of the book. And I say easy, I mean it's attainable to some degree for most people. And then from there on out, starting in Yud Bet or Yud Gimel, whatever it was, I'm looking, it would be much higher, really ramping that up. Oh, Harry, sorry to interrupt everybody. Harry, good morning. And I understand that your wife is home, Baruch Hashem, and just continue refuah shalema. And because we are in a new zone, and he's trying to have us shoot a lot higher than, and going out of our comfort zone. And remember, I told you that you don't have to shoot for all at once. He's going to kind of tell us that now. Again, we're at the very end, the last paragraph of Parak 15, Tetvav. What is it you have to be careful about when you want to acquire the midah of prishut? You don't want to jump to an extreme. And I'm going to explain this. It's not going to work. You have to do this slowly, slowly. Today, you try to acquire some of this character trait. And tomorrow, and the next day, you try to acquire a little bit more. To the point where you get used to it completely. Because that'll become second nature to you. What is he saying? You find, and we talked about this idea known as flipping out, which is a phenomenon that has happened over the many years of the growth of the so-called gap year movement, in some cases along with the Baal Tshuva movement, where people who either find God, I mean that in very loose terms, or decide they want to ramp up their religious observance, or they were not observant at all and now looking to become observant, feel the necessity for some reason to go from 0, not to 60, but to 10,000. And whatever was not done before, absolutely every single thing with every single detail has to be done starting day number 2. And that, again, is just, like I said before, a recipe for disaster. Not going to happen. It's not going to work. And in most cases, what happens is the person just falls back to wherever they were. If a person is a Baal Tshuva, then very often when that happens, you'll find that they slide farther back. When a person comes and tries to, person comes to Israel, I'm talking about specifically like a gap year, it comes from a religious background, davens 2 times a day and everything else, and all of a sudden they somehow have this spiritual awakening, which is fantastic. But then instead of going slowly to grow, they just decide they're going to jump into the deep end. Now, in some areas, that'd be good. I mean, persons decide it's not pre-shoot, it's not necessarily pre-shoot, but in this sense, but person decides they want to stop talking Lashon Hara to try and go the whole 9 yards right away. That's good. But we're talking about across the board, that a person is going to go, all of a sudden, they're going to eat exactly what they need and not one crumb more. And they're going to sleep exactly the amount they need to sleep. And they're going to, remember, it means a sense of abstinence from things, more of things that are permitted, more than you actually necessarily need. So if you don't need more than 5 hours of sleep, then 5 hours and 1 minute is verboten. You can't do it. And if you're okay with a piece of matzah with a little bit of cheese on it, and instead instead of having that, you have a little bit less cheese, okay, because you're still going to feel full. It's not going to cut it if you try and do everything at one time. And this is true with all of the midot he's talked about in this book, but especially from this point to the end of the book. There are going to be some, if you think this is challenging, you'll see a lot more challenging. And again, I know I've said this before, but the idea is that we have to keep in mind that even though maybe it's unattainable for most people in a complete sense, but it's attainable to a degree. There's no question. There's nothing that we're going to learn from now to the end of this book, which looks like it probably takes about another 8-9 months, that we will not learn, that you can't take away something from it that you can accomplish in your lives. But you notice the last sentence he says, he's used this expression before. Once you start to do something in a repetitive fashion, it becomes second nature. Now, having said that, I want to tell you something and follow up on a story from 3 months ago. I had mentioned, for those of you who weren't in the class back then, 3 months ago, I told you a story that I was away for Shabbat, and I came across a sefer. The sefer was a book that you could learn 1 page a day, and within 1 year exactly, you will finish all of the 4 sections of Shulchan Aruch. Again, I'm not going to go into whole details, but the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is broken down into 4 main sections, and that will be part of this class I hope to give at one point. And if you learn 1 page a day, it's a pretty decent amount each day, that you will finish the entire Shulchan Aruch in a year. And I told the story that I had gotten it. I got it actually arrived on Yom Yerushalayim. And I was going to wait because on the top of each page, it has the date starting with Rosh Hashanah. You started Rosh Hashanah. I was going to wait 3 months to Rosh Hashanah. And I was going to start. And I said, nah, not a good idea. Im kvar, az kvar, I really should start. And I want to show you something. Actually, I'll just move the computer. Come with me. Let's see if I can get this in the, let me see where I am. Yeah. This, maybe open this. Okay. This is the Mishnah Berurah, which is a commentary. Wait, do I have it? My finger on it? Yeah. This set here is the Mishnah Berurah. It's a commentary on the first section of Shulchan Aruch, known as Orach Chaim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 volumes in the classic printing. And it's the Chafetz Chaim's commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, along with other commentaries. Now, this is representative of the first section of Shulchan Aruch. Had I decided to wait till Rosh Hashanah, I wouldn't have touched any of this. Tomorrow, I'm finishing this. I'm finishing on Purim, finishing the laws of Purim tomorrow. Now, why do I mention that? Because I'm such a tzaddik and I want you to all be like me? God forbid. You don't want to be like me. Why am I mentioning it, though? Because when in the beginning, it wasn't so easy. It's like, it's a lot to do every day. Besides the daf I do, and besides the other stuff I do, it was, pushing it. And one day I missed. And the next day I said, oh my God, there's like 1,000 things I have to learn now. But then it became a part of me, part of routine. Now, it's not just, remember we talked about this, there's sur me'ra v'aseh tov. We talked about this at the beginning of the book. We have to veer away from the bad and then gravitate towards and do good. So even, getting away from bad, it also takes, you have to get used to it. But we forget sometimes that doing good It also takes time. You have to start getting into it. Once you do, it becomes part of your routine, but part not in a bad way, like, oh, so here we go again, but in a way of doing something positive on a daily basis. And because it took me, I'd say, at least 2-3 weeks to get into it, that it became a part of my daily learning. But then after that, it's become like if I were to miss it, Tisha B'Av was weird. It was crazy because obviously you couldn't learn. So I tried to do it at night. I was too tired. So the next day I pushed a little bit and did more. But it's a matter of step by step. You got to do slowly. And for some people, they could do, it would take them maybe 4 years, maybe do a part of a page every day. Whatever, it doesn't make a difference. Person learning Daf Yomi. There's Daf Yomi, there's Amud Yomi, which is just one side. There's the Daf Shvu'i weekly page. It could be halacha. It could be a lashon hara stuff. It could, whatever it is, whatever you decide you're going to do. If you have a problem with some particular character trait that you want to work on, whether it's anger or it's miserliness or it's laziness, any of those things, the same thing he's telling you now about pre-shoot applies to everything we're talking about. Whether it's the learning, whether it's the staying away from something, don't expect it to happen overnight. Now, where that may be different is when a person is becoming a Baal Tshuva, then and certain things has to stop overnight. Like, for example, a person who really wants to do it the right way, stop eating treif. Okay, that just has to happen. Now, for some, it's process. For some, it'll be, okay, I'm not going to eat meat stuff out, but I'll still have dairy things. And I'll have just fish. But then slowly working towards whatever works, as long as you're working with somebody in order to make sure you're doing it the right way and not just trying to trick yourself. It's important also. But I'm spending an extra couple of minutes on this line here because it's so important for us to understand. He does not expect, and I say he, I'm talking about the Ramchal, but we should not expect of ourselves to make this massive overnight change. I just said, when was this? I think last night in Tanya or Sunday in I forgot which one. That if you go, for example, to Yom Kippur, and you sit down at Kol Nidre, and you think, okay, here comes Kol Nidre, here comes your kid. This is it. This year I'm going to be so much better. I'm not going to do anything wrong. I'm going to change every single thing in my life. You might as well go home and go to sleep because you're really just fooling yourself because it's not going to happen. Tachlis, it doesn't happen. But what does happen and can happen, you say, look, I've screwed up the same thing year after year. What I said I'll ched for this year, I said I'll ched for last year and 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago. But you know what? I'm going to focus on this. I'm really going to make an effort on this. That is worth so much more in Hashem's eyes than saying, okay, I'm going to try and do everything. It's because it's not going to happen. There's an expression in Gemara that says, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you tried to grab the majority of it, you didn't grab any of it. What does that mean? If you try to not overcompensate, but to overdo it, then not only did you not accomplish what you wanted to do, but you may have even gone backwards. And that's what he's telling us here. Look again, just at the last line. He says, Hayom yikneh katsat mimenu. Today you'll acquire a little bit of it. And tomorrow you add a little bit. Me'at yoter, a little more. Ad chitragel bo legamre. Till you get completely used to it. Ask anyone who does Daf Yomi. When they started Daf, it's just an example I use, because it could be anything. When they started Daf Yomi, and they get the Brachot Amud Aleph, right? The very beginning of Shas, of the Talmud. And they learn their first Daf, it feels great. The second day, it feels great. You get out, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, Tet Vav, like, gosh, gotta do the Daf, right? Gotta do the Daf. And then they have to think about it, to remind themselves, maybe they put it in their phone, maybe they go to a shir, maybe listen online. But then ask that same person who's now in the middle of Ketubot, especially if you made it through Yifamot. Is it part of your life the same way as it was in Brachot in the beginning? Do you need the reminders? Do you need to, or has it become an actual part of who you are in your learning? It becomes almost seamless for some people, not everybody, but that if you were to miss the daf, you would almost feel like something was lacking. And that's wonderful. But it should never be the point where it's a point of obsession. anything with these midot, anything with these mitzvot, anything that should never come from a form of obsession, because that leads to other problems. There is an issue of something known as I don't remember the terminology, something like a religious obsession, something like that. Taking the lulav and oh, wait, I know the hadassim are supposed to be higher than the avot. Are they? I've got to check it. And like, oh, wait, did I say the bracha the right way? I actually stood next to someone. I couldn't believe it with my ears. I stood next to someone davening years ago. I don't even know if it was in Israel. I don't even remember. And I'm not making this up. He obviously has OCD, and he's a middle Shemon Esrei, but he's davening a little loud. And I hear him say the following: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Avotenu Elokei Abraham Elokei Yitzchak Elokei Abraham Elokei Yitzchak Elokei Yaakov. Baruch atah Hashem. He went like the first line in Shemon Esrei. He must have said take 5 minutes because he didn't get the words straight. He didn't feel that they were right. So you got to be careful on that extreme as well. Okay, so much for the pontificating. Let's go to the next chapter. The next chapter is known as Tahora. Okay, take a look in your book, because this is just an aside having nothing to do with the topic. There are 2 words I want to point out to you having to do with Hebrew that you have to understand in order to know how to pronounce certain things. If you'll notice the word Tahora, right? You see it's Hey, Tet, Hey, Resh, Hey. Under the Hey, you have a kamatz with 2 dots, a shva next to it. 99.999% of the time, that is pronounced more like an O sound, like a combination of an O and an O. It's like O. Tahora. It is not tahara. There is a word tahara, and there is a word kodesh kadashim. Kodesh kodashim would have that O with the 2 dots under it, or the kamatz 2 dots, and that's when you refer to the actual holy of holies. Everything else, like when there was meat that was holy of holies, it was called kodesh kadashim. People get those mixed up, and it's easy to remember. Just look at the word. Then he's going to quote a pasuk. If you look at, I don't know what line it's in yours, mine, like the second line, he quotes, we'll see the context in a minute. It says, Lev Tahor Ba'ali Elokim. It's a very famous pasuk because there's so many songs of Lev Tahor that are made. There's a group called Lev Tahor. Many people, this is one of the more common mistakes I hear, say, Lev Tahor Ba'ali Elohim, which means God created in me a pure heart. That's not what it says. It says, Lev Tahor Bira. It's command, it's tzivui. He's asking Hashem, please create in me a pure heart. Bira means create, means I'm asking you, bira mashu, create something. Baraz, past tense, which means he created. In a similar vein, this past week we read in the Torah, ve'achalta, ve'savata, uve'rachta. Although other people will say ve'achalta, ve'savata, uve'rachta. Okay, they're saying the accent on the wrong word, the wrong syllable. Well, I've said this before. They say ve'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. It is patently wrong, and not only is it wrong, it means something else. When you say ve'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, it means you loved God. You have to say ve'ahavta, and you shall love God. It's a totally different meaning. Uve'rachta means and you benched and you blessed. Uve'rachta, and you will bless. So even if you hated grammar, whenever you learned it in your life, whether it was in Yesodi, in elementary school or in high school or in college, or when you first learned about Hebrew, and you said, I hate dikduk, I hate grammar, that's fine. You can hate all the grammar you want. But when it comes to actual pronunciation, there's some basic things you need to know. It's another thing I should probably explain in a full-blown shiur. For those of you who know Tamei Mikra, the little notes, the cantillation notes on the words, which allows the person to read from the Torah for the proper tune, even if you don't know what the tunes are, the notes tell you how to pronounce the word, where the proper accent goes. Sometimes you have a word that may be accent on the first syllable, and sometimes on the second. I'm going to give you one example, and then we're going to move on. When I get into this, I have to explain a little bit more. In the beginning of Parshat Truma, it says it makes a mikdash. We're told to make a mikdash. It says ve'asu mikdash, not ve'asu, it's ve'asu mikdash, and they shall make for me a tabernacle. Go a few psukim later, and it says ve'asu aron atzei shitim. You shall make an aron, an ark of acacia wood. Why is one ve'asu and one is ve'asu? It's the exact same word. There's a rule when you have a word that comes after the 2-syllable word, or it's not even 2 syllables. You have a single syllable word. The word is li. Then the word before it, the accent moves back a step. It's called nasogachot. So instead of saying ve'asuli, it's ve'asuli. That's asu aron. Now, if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, that's fine. You can always listen to this again in slow motion. But it's something I do want to give a class on one day. So one is going to be about the transmission of Torah to modern times and how it's broken down into time periods and what these books really are. One's going to be about Zmanim during the day. And one's going to have to do a little bit about pronunciation of Hebrew. By the way, the word is not pronunciation. It's pronunciation. It's another word that's mistakenly said. Oh, one more. Okay, I'm on a tear. I got to keep going. They take the Torah back Shabbat morning, right? We say, sorry, not there. In the morning, in Lamnatseach, right before the Mesilat Zion, you'll see that many people say, hold on, I need to say, look at the sitter to tell you the word. Because I know that what we're doing in Mesilat Yesharim is important, but this I need to spend another minute on. Let's see, I should have sent it today. Here we go. Okay, here's the word. Okay, in the Mnatseach, which is right before Uvalat Zion in the morning. Please help me understand the word Hanikiyut and Tara. Yes, we're going to get. I haven't even given the introduction of the chapter, but definitely that's one of the things we're going to do. Bezrat Hashem. Thank you. It says like this. Niranana bishuatecha uv'shem Eloheinu nidgol yimalei Adonai kol mishalotecha. Without going into what the meaning of the pasuk is, here's a very, very commonly mispronounced word. Most people say v'shem Elokeinu nigdol, like will be greater for the word gadol. That's not what it says. It says nidgol for the word degel. It will carry the flag, so to speak, of God. So it's not nidgol. So lots of stuff like that. I'm not going to get any further. Okay, this chapter. Midat Torah, Mimi asked the question that we have to answer. It's important to understand this chapter. And that is, she wants to know what is the difference between Nikiyut, which we did extreme amounts of important stuff on, which was chapter 11, the longest chapter of the book that I can remember, and Tahara. Nikiyut meant cleanliness, spiritual cleanliness, and Tahara is purity. I mean, what's the difference between pure and clean? So let's use physical explanation, and that may help to understand. Let me just close this. Let's say I haven't taken a shower for a couple of days, and I'm dirty and I'm stinky, and I take a brand new suit and I put it on. The clothing that I'm wearing on the outside are clean. What's inside is dirty, is impure. I may do an action that on the surface is complete nikiyut. I'm doing it because I want to do the mitzvah. But I still may have some interest in it. Now, for those of you in the Tanya class, you know, we talked about this as recently as last night. The concept of when I do a mitzvah, when I do a chesed, for example, I give someone, I don't use the word chesed, I want to give tzedakah. Someone comes to my door, this example I gave last night. So for those of you who heard it last night, sorry. Someone comes to my door and I do the mitzvah of giving tzedakah. Guy comes to my door, his hands out because he's hungry. And I go in the fridge and I make a sandwich and I hand him the sandwich. I did a tremendous mitzvah, right? I did maybe nachnasat orchim, but I definitely did the mitzvah of giving tzedakah. Tzedakah is not just money, it's food. It could be other things, clothing. But why did I give tzedakah? Why did I give him the food? Because I didn't want him to be hungry. I wanted to make him feel good. I felt bad that he didn't feel good. I needed to make myself feel good that I helped him. All those things are fine that you did. It was a mitzvah you did. But there's still the perspective or the aspect of I involved. So what I did was I did nikiyut because I wanted to do the mitzvah. And I did the mitzvah the best way possible. And I didn't have anything. I didn't say I'm giving it to him because I want to make him think I'm a rich man. But because there's still internally a drive that I need to satisfy my own ego, even though we now think that way. That's not nikiyut. That's nikiyut, sorry, but it's not tahora. It's not purity. We're going to see, he's going to explain that it has to do with our mind and our heart. It's more of an internal emotional aspect than it is external. And even more so, he's going to make a comparison. We're going to see. Let's take a look at the beginning of the chapter and hopefully become a little clearer. That's the introduction. That's what the whole section's about. Tahora, or purity, is the concept of perfecting our hearts and our minds. I told you the story at least 2 or 3 times. I'm going to tell you it again because it belongs here. A person can daven Shmona Esrei with a complete heart, davening to Hashem, thinking exactly what they're supposed to think, understanding the words they're saying, and still be mistaken. The mistake I give you is the example I gave many times of one of the Rosh Yeshiva, where I went to Yeshiva in high school, and then after high school, where all the Rosh Yeshiva sat in the front. And when it came time for Shemona Esrei, so he went, before he stepped out of Shemona Esrei, he looked to his right, to his left to make sure he's the last one saying Shemona Esrei, because they all had to wait for whoever's the last one. So they had to wait for him. So he wants to make sure he's the last one. Now, is it nikiyut? Is davening and everything until that point he davened with a clear head and everything else? Maybe, I don't know. But the machashava, the thought at the end that people have to see him davening so long and feel, wow, what a tzaddik, that's the opposite of tahora. That's yuhara. That's showing off. That's self-interest. That's the worst. Tikkun halev machashavot is a tremendous challenge. I'll explain to you why. Every single one of us has been in a situation where we're in a conversation with somebody that we don't want to be in. Every one of us. Sometimes it's on the phone. Sometimes you bump into somebody. Sometimes it's after davening. Sometimes it's in your car waiting for somebody. But we've all been in that situation. Most people, unless they're not so nice, we'll carry on the conversation at least a minimal amount. Oh, by the way, sorry, I have to go, whatever it might be. But inside, what are they doing? Oh my God, I can't wait till he shuts his mouth already. Leave me alone. If you ever see me walking down the street like this, and you see my phone screen is dark, look for it, because it means I'm pretending to be on the phone so that someone doesn't listen and talk to me. There's certain people I do that with, but don't be insulted if it's not any one of you, chas v'shalom. Anyways, I gave away my secret, so oh well. So what happens is that outwardly, don't worry, Mark, when I pass by, I don't put the phone next to my ear, probably. Outwardly, I'm being pleasant, I'm talking to you, and in my head, I'm thinking like, just get me out of here already. And even that may be an extreme. How about the heart? You do a mitzvah, you did it completely. You did absolutely everything the Shulchan Aruch said. But your heart wasn't in it necessarily. Did you do it from a perspective of nikiyut? It was naki, it was clean from any potential other things that was not done properly. The mitzvah, you followed every possible approach, everything. But in your heart, it wasn't all there. So it's nikiyut, but it's not yet tahora. You have to work on the lev and the machashava. This is the expression we find by David HaMelech, who said, Lev tahor berali Elohim. God, please create in me a pure heart. Now, a little spoiler alert. We're not going to see this in Mesilat Yesharim, but we will see it in Tanya, and I'm going to mention it now. There is a concept, we're going to come across a pasuk, and David HaMelech did not have, he got to a point in his life after Bathsheba, where he was able to eradicate his Yetzer Hara. Because he says he has a halal b'kirbi, he has a halal, a space in his heart. Not physical, talking spiritually, that where his Yetzer Hara was, it's gone. But right now, we're not talking about that. I'm mentioning it because some of you may be aware of that. So we're going to move on. V'inyana, and the issue is, shelo yaniach adam makom la'yetzer b'ma'asav. A person cannot allow his Yetzer Hara enter in any way, shape, or form into any of his actions. Hold on, I lost the place. Every single step he takes should be filled only with fear of Hashem, with wisdom. Should be no shred of sin involved or any kind of desire. What does that mean? He's going to give us first an introduction, and he's going to give us a very, what I consider an extreme example from the Gemara. This is true even with things that are physical, our physical needs. Even though you have conducted yourself, you've acted with the form of pre-shoot. That was the last couple of chapters. You only used exactly what you absolutely needed in this world. He still has to cleanse, purify his heart. I'm not going to use the word cleanse because that'll be nikyu. To purify his heart and his thoughts. That even with the little bit he is taking, he shouldn't try to have any form of pleasure or desire while he's eating it. But rather his intention should be only for the good that comes as a result. Remember, we talked about this idea that when you eat, and you can eat l'shem shamayim, you raise the idea, you raise the level to the kedusha. We talked about this in Yesharim, we talked about in Tanya, we talked about other venues, that you can change it, the actual eating process. But you still have hanaf, you still have enjoyment. He's saying that you can actually put that hana'ah, that enjoyment and that desire aside completely from your mind and your heart. Is that a good thing? First of all, remember, we're talking about a very tiny percentage of people. And second of all, listen to the example he gives. He brings this example from the Gemara. Talks about Rabbi Eliezer. I'm going to read 2 lines and explain. When he was having relations with his wife, he would uncover part of himself, recover part of himself, and when he finally had to do the act, it was as if he was being forced by a demon to do it. Meaning he didn't want to have any pleasure from it. He's just doing it because it's a mitzvah. Okay, must have been a fun guy at parties. But he was doing it only for the mitzvah. He didn't want to have any pleasure from it, none whatsoever. He's doing it because Hashem commanded him, because of approval, whatever it might be. That's it. Now, yes, that's an extreme example, obviously. This is Rabbi Eliezer. And based on this idea, Shlomo Melech said, in all of your ways, you should know Hashem, and he will straighten out your path. What does that mean in normal English? This is similar to the idea of what it says, we've seen this before, of down the path with which one person wants to go, they will take him. The Maharsha commentary on Gemara, I think in the Sechet Shabbat says, what do you mean they will take him? He's the malachim that accompany a person starting with Shabbat. You want to go be a bad guy? They'll go with you. You want to be a good guy? They'll go with you. But this is even more now. This is saying that if you are able to infuse your ways, your whole life, with De'ah Hashem, that everything you do, that your mind is focused on serving God. That's why you do things. That's how you do things. Then Hashem's going to help you along that as well. It's interesting that during the course of the year, this is not my chiddush. I heard this years ago, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. During the course of the year, when we say Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, this applies to it. Doesn't work for Sfaradim in the second half. Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, when they say the long Tachanun, you have a phrase that says about Hashem hapoteach yad b'tshuva. Hashem opens his hand for tshuva, meaning, here I am. You want to do tshuva? I'm right here. Come join me. We come to Ne'ilah. This is not in Sachatot Bizach, but it is in Ashkenaz. You come to Ne'ilah after Elul, after blowing shofar, after Rosh Hashanah, after I start to make tshuva, after Kol Nidre and Shacharit and Musaf and Mincha and hundreds of Al-Chet and all the Hashanus. At the very, very, very end of Ne'ilah, it says, Hanoten yad tshuva. Not Hashem poteach yad, that he opens his hand for tshuva. He gives his hand to tshuva. He says to us, you've tried all you can. I see you've tried. You've gone to the shul. You've davened. You said your Al-Chet. You listened to the shofar. You fasted. You did everything. Now it's my turn to step in. Here's my hand. Come take it. I'm going to help you up. And that's what this is also telling us, that we do what we can do, but we have to try our hardest. We have to try our best, and not to go overboard and not to go to an extreme, but to try our best. And when we do that, Hashem gives his hand to us in order to help us do tshuva and help us up. You know, when a person falls down, I saw a funny thing the other day. How to know if you're old? If you trip and fall and people laugh, you're young. If they run over to help you and see if you're okay, you're old. So anyways, so if a person trips outside and they can't get up, I've fallen and I can't get up. So what happens? How does someone help you up if they're not nearby? What do? They just stand there, they grab your clothes and pull you up? No. They 99% of the time, what are they going to do? Unless the person's, God forbid, not able to, they'll put their hand and take your hand or something if your arm is not okay and help pull up. That's exactly what Hashem does to us with the end by Ne'ilah. After all, but he does that after we do our try. We have to try. We can't just lie there and say, okay, I'm just going to kind of coast through Elul and Tishrei, and it comes to Ne'ilah, I'm going to, jump up and there we go. A person may not do well all those days. So those 40 days, a person may not do well, but they try some. Hashem's always going to be there at the end to help us up. Tov, I will, Bezrat Hashem, continue with this next week. I will remind everybody, I know you probably won't be able to be there, but if you are in Yerushalayim by any chance, next Wednesday, I'll remind you next Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to be at Pomerantz bookstore, Bezrat Hashem, signing books, telling a little about the story of the book, and whoever can be there happens to be, don't make a special trip. Trust me, I'm not worth coming in for. But if you are, you're more than welcome to pop in, say hi, and tell everyone to buy 25 copies. That'd be fine. You don't have to. 23 is okay also. Have a great day, everybody.